Something was off. She shifted her weight half an inch, no one noticed. The conversation kept going. Charts, simulations, laughter. She didn't look amused. A glance at the door, a second too long. Her eyes narrowed. Just a civilian, someone muttered. They kept talking. She didn't. He stood 6 feet away. Wrong stance, wrong uniform, wrong silence. She saw it. They didn't. And by the time they realized, she had already moved. Not to stop him. To finish what no one else saw coming. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing and let us know where you're listening from. The briefing room aboard the USS Resolute hummed with restrained energy. High-ranking officials lined the conference table, ribbons, stars, and decades of command experience represented in every direction. The air carried the weight of strategy, protocol, and silent competition. In the far corner, Jenna Wallace stood quietly, clutching a small notepad. Her credentials read, Department of Homeland Defense Civilian Analyst. To most in the room, she was invisible. Vice Admiral Kenneth Rhodes barely acknowledged her presence. His attention was fixed on the digital projections flashing across the screen. Why is there a civilian in an operational briefing, he muttered to his aide. Jenna didn't react. Her posture was relaxed, eyes calmly tracking the pace of the meeting. But every so often, her gaze flicked toward the overhead ventilation, the corridor shadows just outside the door, the subtle hand movements of a junior comms officer who didn't quite fit. To the Admiral, she was a tag-along, a political checkbox. To Colonel Nathan Briggs, seated 2 chairs away, she was something else. He had seen the personnel file mostly redacted. He said nothing. The room moved forward. Jenna observed in silence, and then she shifted her stance by a single inch. The simulation continued without disruption on the surface. Digital thread overlays displayed on the central screen detailed a mock coastal assault scenario. Ship-to-shore integration, port security protocol, high-value asset tracking. The Vice Admiral's voice cut through the technical chatter with clipped efficiency. Jenna Wallace remained still, but her eyes never stopped moving. She wasn't watching the screens. She was watching patterns. 2 security techs rotated at the entry checkpoint every 30 minutes. At 0900, 1 tech petty officer Levi Nash arrived early. He greeted his counterpart with a handshake, a minor break in protocol, but not entirely uncommon. Except it was the wrong hand. Jenna leaned slightly forward, her notepad still on her lap, untouched. Across the room, Colonel Nathan Briggs glanced her way, barely perceptible. He noticed the shift in her posture, how she shifted weight to the balls of her feet. The last time he saw that stance, she was moving through a kill house in southern Kandahar. On screen, the Vice Admiral briefed an updated force readiness chart. Team Bravo would sweep the eastern port using drones, with a 6-man shore unit establishing perimeter control. Standard urban ISR layout. Jenna's voice was low, calm. She wasn't asking for permission. Sir, she said, eyes fixed on the outer hallway screen feed. There's a breach in the entry rotation. Admiral Rhodes turned, clearly annoyed. Excuse me. Jenna didn't flinch. The man at the checkpoint isn't in your roster. The Admiral scoffed. He was cleared through biometric scan. You don't think we vet our own people? Jenna blinked once, then turned her eyes back to the screen. The feed showed the guard taking a half-step back, right hand hovering near his thigh. Not standard readiness posture, not Navy. Colonel Briggs leaned in now. Sir, I've seen this before. Rhodes waved them both off. This is a controlled exercise. No unauthorized personnel could board. Everything is contained. That word contained hung in the air. At 8:09 4-tier hours, the fire control panel in Corridor 2B flickered, just once, then resumed. Nobody noticed, except Jenna. She stood, quietly, and walked toward the door. Where are you going? The Admiral called out. She didn't answer. She was already gone. Briggs followed, not because of protocol, because of instinct. In the hallway, Jenna moved with a pace that wasn't rushed but deliberate. Her hand brushed the wall, counting structural seams. Her eyes scanned movement angles. The petty officer, the one no one had questioned, turned his head slightly as she approached, just enough to register recognition, and then tension. He reached for something under his sleeve. Wrong move. In under 2 seconds, Jenna crossed the distance, 2 steps, pivot, pressure point to the shoulder, weapon disarmed. A 9mm standard issue, but not naval, no serial, modified slide, suppressor ready. The man was on the ground before he made a sound. Jenna kicked the weapon down the hallway and pinned his wrist with one boot. Her voice was even. Code 7 breach, unauthorized armed individual, corridor 2B. No panic, no volume, just precision. Colonel Briggs pulled his sidearm and secured the area. Marines arrived seconds later. The man didn't speak, but the bomb in his pack, laced with thin-layered PET, said enough. Back in the briefing room, chaos teetered at the edge. Rhodes stood frozen, his projection screen still cycling threat scenarios. Jenna walked back in calmly, hair slightly out of place, eyes focused. She placed the disarmed weapon on the table. No simulation accounts for intent. Briggs stepped forward. He's not one of ours. No record, no clearance. This wasn't part of your drill, Admiral. No one said a word. Jenna didn't gloat. She didn't offer theories. She sat down and picked up her notepad again. Rhodes slowly took his seat. His voice came quieter now. Who the hell is she? Briggs answered without looking at him. She was SEAL Team 5. Now she just watches. Less than 30 minutes after the suspect was detained, the USS Resolute entered a heightened alert status. Security teams were deployed across all key decks. Internal channels were locked. And yet, Jenna Wallace didn't look satisfied. She stood by the internal surveillance console, eyes locked onto data streams, not the main threat dashboard, but a side-channel environmental systems, electrical fluctuations, and badge movements. Something wasn't right. The man she had taken down wasn't working alone. He was a test, a probe. Down in the ship's engineering deck, a routine technician sweep caught a discrepancy. A heat signature was detected in a sealed maintenance shaft, one not scheduled for access. Initial assumption false red, a hot exhaust vent. Jenna disagreed. She approached the Admiral directly this time. Her voice was level, her stance deliberate. There's a secondary actor on board, possibly embedded in maintenance crew. The signature is human. Vice Admiral Rhodes looked worn. He was no longer dismissive, just unsteady. You have proof. She nodded once. Thermal signature, entry point lines up with scheduled coolant system check, but the crew chief never logged it. Someone's hiding. Rhodes looked to his staff. No one had a response. Briggs stepped forward. I'll send a containment team. Jenna stopped him. No weapons, not yet. Whoever's down there is waiting for a response. She glanced at the ventilation map. If he's ex-military, and I think he is, the moment we show guns, he triggers whatever he's here for. It took 7 minutes to reroute external airflow and reduce ambient noise. At 0951 hours, Jenna descended alone into the secondary engineering shaft. No body armor, no weapon drawn, just a comm earpiece and a compact thermal scope clipped to her belt. The hallway was dark, temperature 3 degrees higher than average, a subtle residue of oil on the floor, recent movement. She paused at the junction box. Then she spoke calmly, but with purpose. You were supposed to wait for the extraction signal. You moved early. A long silence, then a voice, rough and low. You're not one of them. Jenna stepped forward. No, I'm one of you. But I left the field when I realized people like you wouldn't. From behind a panel, a figure shifted. Civilian overalls, face partly covered, not afraid, not confused. Just calculating. He wasn't here to destroy the ship. He was here to observe. And worse, he had help. Do you know what they're running upstairs? The man said quietly. A drill based on faulty assumptions. They still think it's external infiltration. Jenna's eyes narrowed. Then you're going to tell me who else is on board. He smiled a tired, bitter smile. Too late. A beep echoed from the comms line. Briggs's voice cracked through Jenna. New breach portside access bay. Unauthorized signal burst just triggered a satellite ping. Jenna's blood ran cold. This was never about this ship. Up above, chaos began again. The access bay, marked as inactive, had just broadcast a ping burst using a decommissioned NATO encryption protocol. meaning this was a relay ship part of an intelligence leak chain. Someone on board was transmitting classified movement data not just about the Resolute, but the entire Joint Task Fleet. Whoever the second operative was, they were smuggling information out, not bombs, and they had just succeeded. Jenna moved fast. She secured the man's zip cuffs and temporary neural inhibitor patch, then bolted up the maintenance stairs. She didn't wait for the elevator. There wasn't time. Deck 3, port side. She reached the control terminal just as a data burst finished its relay. A light blinked transmission complete, a 6-minute window, just long enough to broadcast fleet positioning to someone listening. She stared at the screen. Coordinates, frequencies, encryption keys. This wasn't a rogue actor. This was a breach from inside. Admiral Rhodes arrived 2 minutes later, flanked by Marines. His face had gone pale. Jenna didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She simply handed him the tablet. "This is what we missed while you were watching the drill." He looked at the data. His hands trembled. Where did this signal land? Jenna's voice was cold now. Somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. Maybe a consulate, maybe a boat. But it's gone. The room fell silent again. Rhodes slowly lowered the tablet. "We've just been compromised." Jenna nodded once. "Yes, and it started when you ignored the first warning sign." The simulation was over. The real mission had just begun. The command center was quiet now. Not silent, but quiet in the way that only follows after realization strikes deeper than any briefing ever could. Vice Admiral Kenneth Rhodes stood alone, his back to the large observation glass. Below, sailors moved like clockwork efficient, unaware of what had just slipped past them. He didn't look at them. His eyes were fixed on the tablet Jenna had handed him. The data was still on the screen. Coordinates, burst frequencies, tactical dispositions of 3 entire fleet groups transmitted in under 6 minutes. A compromise on his watch. Rhodes had spent 31 years in uniform. He had seen war not just on screens, but up close. Somalia, Strait of Hormuz, the Eastern Pacific during the Gray Zone standoff of 2006. He'd worked under presidents who trusted him and briefed prime ministers who respected him. But in 31 years, no enemy had ever outflanked him from inside the hull. Until today, and the person who saw it coming was someone he dismissed with a glance. He turned as the door opened. Colonel Nathan Briggs entered, silent, carrying 2 sealed envelopes classified debriefs. Rhodes didn't take them. Instead, he asked quietly, "Who is she? Really?" Briggs hesitated only a moment. "You've seen her file." "I've seen pieces of her file, redacted beyond recognition. No rank, no deployments." Briggs walked over and placed the debriefs on the desk. She was Tier 1, SEAL Team 5, joined during the transition years, back when integration was a quiet policy, not a press release, no media, no stories, no drama, just the mission. Rhodes exhaled slowly. Why did she leave? Briggs gave a small shrug. She never said. Some people walk away because they're broken, some because they've seen too much. I think she walked away because she saw what the system didn't want to admit. Rhodes turned back to the glass. She didn't just neutralize a rogue actor, he said. She saw a network forming in real time, intercepted a secondary signal, prevented an entire fleet from being exposed further. Briggs nodded. She did what we were trained to do. The only difference is she still remembers how to see. Rhodes sat down, slowly. He looked older now, not just by years, but by weight, the weight of assumption. I thought she was just another analyst sent by Washington. Civilian oversight, a bureaucratic checkbox. Briggs didn't respond. Rhodes looked up. Do you think I would have listened if she had introduced herself as SEAL? Briggs finally spoke. No. You would have thought she was trying to impress you. He paused. And that's the difference. She didn't say anything. She let the situation reveal who she was. In that moment, Rhodes understood something that no policy paper had ever taught him. Expertise isn't always loud, competence doesn't wear rank, and the most dangerous person in the room is the one who never asks for credit. Hours later, as the ship returned to normal posture, Rhodes joined Jenna Wallace in the lower deck observation corridor. She was watching the sea, calm, still, composed. "Miss Wallace," he began. She didn't turn around. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, "but I don't expect you to accept one." Finally, she glanced sideways. "You don't owe me anything, Admiral. You owe the sailors on this ship your attention." He nodded. "You saw what none of us did." She shrugged. "I was trained to assume nothing, to read beyond posture and protocol. We used to say, if they look like they belong, they don't." Rhodes looked at her more closely now, really looked. "You're still in it," he said, "even after you left." She gave the faintest smile. "You never really leave. You just go quiet." And with that, she walked away. No salute, no farewell. Just the quiet footsteps of someone who had been underestimated and didn't need validation to keep moving forward. The Admiral remained where he was, watching the reflection of his own face in the glass, older, yes, but also wiser now. Some lessons don't come in combat. Some come in the silence afterward when you realize you were looking the wrong way all along. 2 days later, Jenna Wallace sat in a secure operations cell buried inside Norfolk Naval Station. The room had no windows, just 2 projection screens, a classified operations board, and one silent observer in the corner, a civilian intelligence liaison taking notes without blinking. No one called her civilian anymore. Across from her, a rear admiral from Naval Intelligence slid a folder toward her across the table. It bore a blue security seal and one word, Falcon Route. A code name with history, and now, relevance. The breach on the USS Resolute hadn't been isolated. The signal burst sent from its comms bay had matched pattern fragments intercepted weeks earlier by European defense satellites' short-range encrypted pings mimicking outdated NATO protocols. The conclusion was clear: a sleeper network had activated. But what wasn't clear was how many vessels had already been compromised. And more importantly, how deep inside their own ranks the rot went. Jenna didn't speak as she reviewed the material. She read fast, methodical, quiet, never once looking surprised. To the men in that room, the data was overwhelming. To her, it was familiar. The structure mirrored older Cold War tradecraft, relay nodes, intermediary dead drops, no digital fingerprints left behind. But with one key difference: these weren't Russian or Chinese or even state-sponsored in the traditional sense. They were contracted, leased espionage, mercenary-level infiltration. "Fleet Group East is already repositioning," the Rear Admiral said. "But we're blind in the Atlantic corridor until this network is mapped." Jenna finally looked up. "You're not blind," she said quietly. "You're just used to looking for uniforms instead of behavior." A long pause followed. "Then what do you need?" Her response was calm, precise, 3 names, access to Tier 3 ship movement logs, and complete operational silence from here forward. An hour later, Jenna left the building without ceremony. No convoy, no escort. Just a black bag slung over her shoulder and a burner phone slipped into her back pocket. She didn't report to command. She didn't ask for permission. Because now they needed her. Meanwhile, Vice Admiral Rhodes had submitted a quiet amendment to his chain of command security policy. The first line was simple. Advisory personnel with Tier 1 background are not to be excluded from active threat protocol meetings under any circumstances. No names mentioned, but everyone knew who it referred to. Rhodes wasn't interested in public recognition anymore. He was interested in results. 3 days later, Jenna arrived in Lisbon, Portugal, a nondescript port town used as a logistics stop for NATO replenishment units. But she wasn't here for logistics. She was here for a man named Farouk Lazen, officially a civilian cargo contractor for Allied Maritime Transit, unofficially flagged by a Mi-6 intercept 2 months prior for making frequent, unreported dockside meetups. She didn't contact local authorities, didn't coordinate with field teams. Instead, she sat across the street from his docking slip, sipping weak coffee from a cracked ceramic mug, watching. She waited 5 hours. At 16:02, he arrived. Wearing civilian clothes, moving like someone who hadn't seen war but understood where to hide from it. He walked with a slight limp, old injury, but his eyes sharp, scanning, looking for surveillance, finding none. Except her. Jenna followed him at a distance, not tailing, shadowing. At 16:20, he met with a port security officer. Money changed hands. A package was passed, not large, but dense, labeled maintenance blueprints, storage decks. It was too familiar. She'd seen this operation before, years ago, in the Baltic. Old techniques, new face, same objective. Ship schematics, internal access layouts, evacuation protocols. Not for sabotage, for navigation. Whoever these operatives were, they weren't trying to sink ships. They were trying to move through them undetected. At 16:32, Jenna made her move. Calm, direct. She approached Lazen from behind, cutting him off at a pedestrian choke point between two containers. Her voice was low. "You're not supposed to be here." He froze, not in fear and recognition. "You left," he said. "You were done." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her jacket, pulled out a photo of the face of the man from the Resolute. "This one of yours." Lazen didn't blink. "Then I'm not talking." Jenna nodded once. "I didn't ask you to." Moments later, a black van rolled up. Intercept team. No sirens, no drama. She stepped away as they took him into custody. Later that night, Jenna sent a one-line message from her secure channel. "Falcon route is active in Lisbon. Confirmed maritime infiltration patterns. Lazen in custody." No signature, no emoji, no thanks required. She deleted the message immediately after it's sent, and then disappeared back into the city. Jenna Wallace didn't come back to be a hero. She didn't ask for another badge, didn't reactivate her clearance level, didn't sign back into any system. She simply kept moving, alone. Each new city, a new port, a new anomaly in a sea of data became another dot on a mental map she never shared. Her world no longer followed chains of command. It followed patterns. In Valencia, she intercepted a comms burst buried inside container manifests. In Split, Croatia, she found a falsified crew rotation sheet that had been used to ferry a man with diplomatic credentials to 3 separate military docks. In every case, the trail went cold before traditional agencies even finished their paperwork. But Jenna didn't need red tape. She had instinct and time. She knew how to wait, how to vanish, how to hunt. What changed, though, wasn't just her effectiveness. It was how she carried it. In the past, during her years in SEAL Team 5, action was everything. You moved, you cleared, you neutralized. The mission was won or lost in heartbeats. Now, it was won in the shadows by staying still longer than anyone else could tolerate. She no longer chased targets. She cornered them. She once sat across from a suspected asset for 3 hours in a cafe in Marseille, never speaking, never revealing her presence, only watching. By the time he reached for the burner phone under the table, she was already gone, and so was the SIM card he thought he still had. What Jenna was becoming wasn't something they trained for. There was no manual for this phase. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was a silent filter separating signal from noise in a world saturated with both. The biggest shift didn't happen in the field. It happened when she returned, briefly, to Washington. Rear Admiral Rhodes had called her in unofficially. No briefing room this time, just a bench outside a private memorial garden inside Naval HQ. "You've been operating without authorization," he said, "but also without failure." She didn't answer. "I've spoken with Joint Operations Command," he added. "They want you back in a permanent role." Jenna turned slightly toward him. "There's no such thing as permanent anymore." Rhodes nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say that." He handed her a file, thin, unmarked. "Then consider this an informal request. Keep doing what you're doing. We won't ask where you are. We'll just listen when you speak." She didn't take the file. She didn't need to. That moment marked a turning point. Not in career, in identity. For years, Jenna had wrestled with who she was without the uniform, without the briefings, without the SEAL trident. She now understood the uniform never made her capable. Her silence did. Her refusal to explain herself. Her choice to act without needing credit. She began reaching out subtly to others like her, former operators, analysts, agents who had walked away from the noise. They didn't meet in rooms. They met through fragments, shared observations, quiet confirmations, handoffs done in seconds. A network without name, formed by respect, not protocol. And slowly, piece by piece, she started building something bigger than herself. Not a task force, not a program, a method. One built on patience, discipline, observation, and the belief that not everything that matters needs to be seen. Some nights, in the small safe-house rooms she stayed in unadorned and windowless, Jenna would stare at the blank walls and think back to her early days. How much energy she had spent trying to prove she belonged. How many briefings she'd walked into, already half dismissed by men who never read her file. Now, the same institutions watched her from a distance, not with distrust, but with deference. Because she had proven something far rarer than skill. She had proven restraint. She could have taken command. Instead, she took responsibility. She could have sought attention. Instead, she disappeared into the mission. And in doing so, she became something most never even notice. Until it's far too late. The storm never arrived. No major attack. No dramatic showdown on the deck of a warship. And yet, weeks later, entire corridors of classified communication channels were rewritten because of what Jenna Wallace exposed. Her name never appeared in reports. No commendation was issued. No press release was drafted. But inside high-security command briefings, when someone mentioned the failure on the Resolute or the signal traced from Lisbon, they didn't say her name. They just said, "That analyst saw it first." Everyone knew who that meant. At a NATO counterintelligence summit in Brussels, a simple image was shown on screen, a diagram of infiltration patterns using overlapping civilian contractor roles across 5 fleets. No details, no operations mentioned. But the model became doctrine. It was called Wallace layering. No one asked where the name came from. Those who needed to know already knew. In a world obsessed with visible authority, with titles, ranks, and public recognition, Jenna had quietly reminded an entire system of something it had forgotten. The strongest operators are often the ones no one sees coming, because they never needed to be seen at all. Vice Admiral Rhodes kept her name on a private clearance list, updated monthly. Each time it passed across his desk, he signed it without pause, not because he controlled her, but because he respected what he couldn't. "She doesn't report to us," he once told a junior officer. "She reports to the mission." As for Jenna, she continued her work. No fixed base, no chain of command, just a constantly shifting ledger of signals, behaviors, and anomalies that most never noticed. She moved through cities like a whisper, not hiding, just uninterested in being noticed. In Montenegro, she passed a warning to an ex-Mossad field agent who hadn't spoken to his own government in years. In Dubai, she identified a ghost identity embedded inside a diplomatic fleet registry. And in the Philippines, she quietly removed a compromised network node 2 days before a joint Navy operation docked in Subic Bay. Each time, her message was the same. No thanks needed, just watch better. And the people she crossed paths with, the ones who had once dismissed her, began to change, too. They started watching more. They started listening when the quiet ones spoke. They started trusting behavior over appearance. In time, some even left their posts, not in disgrace, but to follow her lead, to step outside the loud machinery of command and become something sharper, more aware, less visible, but far more dangerous to those who sought to exploit their systems. One evening, alone on a rooftop in Athens, Jenna watched the Aegean Sea flicker beneath the moonlight. She didn't smile, didn't sigh. She just breathed. Her phone vibrated once, a single message, a string of coordinates, no sender. She looked at them, memorized them, deleted the message. Then she stood, slung her bag over her shoulder, and walked into the night. She had no medals, no biography, no one to call her back. But the work remained. And Jenna Wallace, former SEAL, silent operator, shadow analyst, kept doing what the world quietly depended on. She noticed what others missed. She acted when others froze, and she walked away before anyone could ask who she was. The next time someone says, "She's just a civilian," remember this. Some civilians used to be more than soldiers. Some still are, and some never stopped. In the silence between briefings and action, Jenna Wallace proved something rare and powerful. True strength doesn't advertise itself. She never raised her voice, never wore her past on her sleeve, and yet She reshaped the thinking of commanders, altered security doctrine, and exposed threats hidden beneath layers of assumption. The lesson is clear. Do not mistake quiet for weakness. Do not assume that rank equals readiness, and never overlook those who observe more than they speak. In every system, military, corporate, social, there are Jenna Wallace's individuals who've been through fire and now choose to serve in silence. If you're lucky enough to work alongside one, pay attention. They may just save the room and never ask for credit. If stories like this matter to you, the quiet ones, the unseen moments, the decisions that never make headlines, you may want to stay with this channel. New stories arrive here from time to time, measured, unrushed, built for listening, not scrolling. Some viewers leave a thought below, not opinions, reflections. Those are often worth reading. There are more stories ahead, different names, similar silences. Until then, stay observant.